All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack something absolutely staggering, the heavily debated reality of China's demographic collapse. We're taking a literal mountain of source material, data, and conflicting reports, and we're transforming it into a clear visual journey for you. We are looking at a nation that officially is the second most populous on Earth, but is currently experiencing an unprecedented demographic shift that could, quite literally, completely alter the 21st century. Okay, let's dive right into this by looking at what is actually happening on the ground in cities like Harbin and Fushan. You've got citizens in these urban centers, which on paper have populations in the millions, walking through hollow commercial districts and wondering, where did everyone go? I mean, they are documenting streets that feel totally empty, office buildings that feel hollow, and restaurants with almost no customers. Delivery drivers are even reporting having absolutely no orders. Not just reduced orders, entirely absent. So we're seeing this massive reality gap opening up. On paper, the official government figure from the National Bureau of Statistics is roughly 1.4 billion people, right? But the quiet, abandoned, lived experience tells a totally different story. Even in massive hubs like Beijing and Shanghai, long-term residents are noticing morning subways with available seats and parking garages with plenty of empty spots. The official numbers are just completely colliding with everyday reality. And this contraction is happening in highly tangible ways. Over 20,000 kindergartens closed in a single year in China. Let that sink in. Enrollment is plummeting, and reports show over 5,000 primary schools stopped taking new students in 2024. Institutional infrastructure that was built for an ever-expanding population is now shrinking in real time. To put that in perspective, that's literally dozens of school closures every single day. Let's move into Section 1. How we got here. A historical whiplash. To understand this, we have to recognize that this demographic collapse builds from a catastrophic starting point, the Great Leap Forward famine in 1959. Now, that was followed by a massive baby boom in the 1960s, where families were having up to 7 children. But this boom actually panicked Chinese leadership, particularly military engineers tasked with population planning. And that panic led to the highly aggressive one-child policy in 1979, forcefully restricting births for decades. Fast forward, when the government finally reversed course in 2016, allowing 2 and later 3 children, they fully expected a baby boom. But it never came. So why didn't the boom happen? Well, today, the cultural hangover of the one-child policy is compounded by severe economic realities. This quote from a 27-year-old engineer perfectly captures the mood of modern Chinese youth. They are facing sky-high housing costs. Actually, Chinese homes are statistically less affordable for young people than in the UK or Japan. Add in a stubbornly high youth unemployment rate, near 17%, and the desire or even just the financial ability to start a family is completely crushed. Young people are just opting out of marriage entirely. All right, moving to Section 2, the missing millions, investigating the data. Various analysts and observers argue that the official 1.4 billion number might actually be heavily inflated. Why? Well, historically, local governments inflated their population and student numbers to receive larger subsidies from the central government. In 2013, the government actually audited and revoked 350 million duplicate or fake ghost IDs that were tied to real estate fraud. Plus, there are highly disputed estimates regarding pandemic casualties, with some independent analysts suggesting COVID-19 death tolls were vastly underreported. Now, because of this, alternative estimates range wildly. While the official number sits at 1.4 billion, various Japanese and Russian scholars, along with independent demographic researchers, suggest the real number is somewhere between 800 and 900 million. There are even more extreme, unverified alternative claims circulating online, suggesting the population has plummeted as low as 300 to 400 million. While we are definitely not taking a side on which estimate is the absolute truth, it is clear the gap between official data and lived experience is rapidly widening. Next up is Section 3, the dependency time bomb, an inverted pyramid. The absolutely crucial metric to understand here is the dependency ratio. This basically tracks how many children and elderly retirees must be supported by every 100 working-age adults. Because of the one-child policy, a single 30-year-old today, who is an only child and likely married to another only child, might very soon have to entirely financially support 4 aging parents, with far fewer social safety nets to rely on. When you run the math on this, it reveals a shocking demographic death spiral. Today, China is at a relatively healthy 45 dependents per 100 workers. But by 2050, it hits 70. That mirrors the severe aging crisis Japan is experiencing right now. But look at 2100. The UN projects an astronomical 128 dependents for every 100 workers. That means there will literally be more elderly people requiring pensions and healthcare than actual working adults to fund them. It completely inverts the economic model that made China a superpower. Which brings us to Section 4, the geopolitical fallout, global stakes. This immense domestic burden creates severe military recruitment challenges. The youth labor pool is projected to drop by 75 million by 2040. The People's Liberation Army desperately needs college-educated youth with STEM backgrounds for modern warfare. But those highly skilled graduates overwhelmingly prefer lucrative careers in the private tech sector. Furthermore, 70% of Chinese soldiers come from one-child families. Parents who have poured literally all their resources into their only child are deeply, deeply reluctant to risk them in combat.
And this sparks a massive geopolitical debate among analysts. We impartially report both sides here. One side argues for the closing window theory, suggesting this demographic squeeze makes China a declining power, which might provoke aggressive, immediate foreign policy action, like moving on Taiwan before their military pool shrinks too far. Conversely, other analysts argue for unhindered modernization. They point out that China still has 10 to 20 years of massive resources left to modernize its forces, and there's no current evidence in their military writing that they feel they must rush.
Faced with this complete systemic unraveling, shrinking schools, empty streets, a looming pension crisis, and military shortfalls, we really have to ask the obvious question: can government subsidies and pro-natalist policies actually turn the tide? Well, the short and stark answer from demographic experts all around the world is no. International examples basically prove that once birth rates plummet in a developing or developed economy, financial incentives totally fail. South Korea spent hundreds of billions, yet their fertility rate dropped to 0.72. Japan spent decades trying, and they set at 1.15. China's current response is basically just a scaled-down version of these failed attempts. I mean, offering a $500 annual childcare subsidy barely makes a dent in a society where workplace discrimination against pregnant women is high and the structural costs of living are astronomical. You can coerce a population into having fewer children, but you absolutely cannot coerce them into having more. Which leaves us with this final, truly profound question. The country has zero history of mass emigration to offset these demographic losses. Therefore, as the nation faces the monumental choice between preserving its rigid, closed system or desperately trying to save its economic future, we are left to wonder, is the world's rising superpower destined to simply grow old before it gets rich?